they said, but why would I want to end up with a building that is less efficient, leaky windows? Why would I want to do that? And so they opted for their long-term investment in the building.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler, coming to you from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland in New Zealand, and I'm joined this week by Zach Semke. How you going, Zach?
I'm doing well. How are you, Matthew?
Good. How's things in Seattle?
They're good. We had a beautiful Thanksgiving break with lots of sunshine, which was always a treat in Seattle this time of year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And back with us this week is Mary James. G'day, Mary. How are you?
I'm great. Nothing like a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. Lots of food.
Lots of food, lots of eating. Well, it's great to have you back with us again this week with another great interview. A bit of a very experienced couple from River Architects who are experienced not just in their field but also at the Passive House Accelerator, because we have featured River Architects in a few years ago now on the podcast, but also they've been around the scene and have a fantastic portfolio of projects as well. But this is a really great conversation to talk about some of their learning and where things are at. So we'll get into that. But before we do, we've got a few people to thank, Zach.
We do indeed. So a big thank you to our sponsor of the week, Bewizo. Bewizo makes everything we do here at Passive House Accelerator possible this week, including this episode of the Passive House podcast. So a big thank you. Thank you, too, to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, and our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Zola Windows. And thanks to our champion sponsors, Bewizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Facro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050.
All right, well, let's jump straight into, Mary, your conversation with Juhee and James from River Architects.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Mary James, and I'm here today with Principal James Hartford and Managing Principal Juhee Lee Hartford of River Architects in Hudson Valley. So welcome, both of you.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off just with an idea of your firm's focus and the work you generally do. I know that we have touched base over the years. You had a project in one of my early books, the 2015 New York Passive House Guide, but I know you've changed a lot in the ensuing 10 years. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your firm is today and what your work is focused on.
Great. Yeah. The project that you referenced, I think, is our North Street Passive House, which was our very first one. And that was a retrofit where we added an additional floor to an existing structure that was actually flooded by Hurricane Sandy.
Oh, Sandy.
Yeah. And so sea level rise affected that project prior to us coming on board. We actually, when we renovated it, we actually raised the finished floor height and basically designed it so that all of the materials on that ground floor could take wetting and could be cleaned and dried out again. So we were kind of planning for the future storm event. But so it was a very interesting project for us for a bunch of reasons like that. And then we've continued to do both retrofits and new construction.
I mean, what was great about that client was that when James was meeting with her, presented the benefits of Passive House, the energy efficiency with thermal comfort and resiliency. And she said, why would I build it any other way? That was the launch.
That's great. And so today, just out of curiosity, what percentage of your projects are Passive House?
I would say pretty
Um,
much all of them, right, Juhee?
yes, I would say about 99%.
That's
Um,
great. And you said that you do single family new construction and retrofits, and you also do other building typologies, right?
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, I would say looking at the quantity, maybe 75% of our project is currently a single family.
And what percentage of those are retrofits versus new construction?
Ah, very
Yeah, that
minor.
yeah, I
Retrofit
kind of
is minor. Yeah.
yeah, it kind of comes and goes. There are times when it's close to 50%, but they are a lot harder. And as we work through some of these projects, we realize that working with the existing structure isn't always worth the extra effort. We've go through some pretty heavy duty, kind of evaluations to determine whether it's worthwhile from a kind of materials and kind of embodied kind of energy as well as embodied kind of design integrity perspective. And particularly when we're dealing with later buildings, for example, when we're working on was built over periods during the 80s and 90s, it's just not worth keeping, unfortunately. And so we're often coming to the decision more recently to replace the buildings, but at the same time, sometimes it may include salvaging the foundations and certainly hookups and connections, sewer, septic, and power. So there are savings there.
But there were other successful examples like the High Street. This is a here in Cold Spring, and it's a two-family house side by side. And the client, it's a historic house in a historic neighborhood. Although it was not Passive House certified, we took it to a deep energy retrofit as much as possible. And I would say that was a successful execution there. And, we've also saved multi-family, multi-story historic bank building. So it really depends on each case.
Of
Yeah,
course, yeah, that's the thing with retrofits. It really, everything depends.
right. I'm going
And
to just jump in on the retrofit. It's something we haven't really talked about, but our own house, right, also here in Cold Spring. It's an 1820s circa foundry workers house that's co-joined to the neighbors, and we've been renovating it over the past 20 years now. And it started off with me doing, a lot of the physical labor myself, just simply because of the economics of it and just interest. But it kind of is an arc in the our understanding of energy efficiency and passive house, where the early efforts at uh, renovating, I was addressing things like air tightness and over insulation or exterior insulation, but it wasn't at the same level as, obviously what we came to appreciate as we got deeper into our passive house understanding. But right now we've got an addition that we're adding onto that basically doesn't need any more heat. But the house has been off of fossil fuels since probably
Yes.
2008, something like that. And so, and a lot of that initially required me splitting a lot of firewood, but over time that's been reduced because the greater energy efficiency, and then a switch to from actually only a wood stove to heat the house now to having mini split heat pumps as well.
well, that's great. I'm gonna have to add that to my mental database of people who have renovated their own, done a deep energy retrofit on their own homes. And because there's so much you learn in the process, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's a great example, I think, when of both the embodied energy, but also the embodied history. I mean, like this is a timber frame structure, like our own studio too, right? It's a timber frame structure that has a lot of really beautiful history that was really kind of an almost like an archaeological dig, peeling back the layers literally of fake panel wood over the plaster walls or the oak strip flooring that we're covering over the old wide plank hemlock floorboards and things like that. Why is there that weird lump in the wall to peel it off and to find it that it's a hand-hewn beam that's been just kind of strangely plastered over. So there's just a lot of really interesting character that you were able to retain on top of the avoiding the carbon too.
Yeah, and you mentioned very briefly your own office, which you did a retrofit of too.
Mhm.
And speaking of the office, well, since that first 2015 Passive House project, your firm has really grown. And back then, I think you said you had 2 employees. And how many are you at now?
We're about 10 employees and also now expanding with construction management. And what's a great testimonial about our firm is that we grew with our knowledge and passion about passive house and sustainability. And so during was that 2008 economic downturn, that's when James started to learn about LEED and then moved on to Passive House and now Passive House and a larger, picture of sustainability. It's just our practice has grown with that, which is great, even during economic downturn. So it's a great sign that we're on the right path.
And part of it is also active too, right? I'm the founder of the Passive House Hudson Valley, which was Passive House Alliance Hudson Valley, which, of course, is a kind of professional development and advocacy kind of organization. And that's now expanded across all of New York State. And, so we've done a lot to just raise the general awareness and the kind of the aptitude of the related professions, whether it's architects, engineers, and builders, but also, helping New York State kind of find their footing in terms of adopting stretch code and moving towards passive house as an energy solution.
So your firm, it's so interesting to look at the arc of passive house acceptance. And it seems like you guys have really worked to increase acceptance and awareness of passive house in your build, obviously, since almost all of your clients are reaching for passive house in their builds. What would you say are the main drivers for that in your area? Is it IAQ, health, comfort, resiliency, energy efficiency? What do you think are the main drivers?
Probably all of the above.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
whatever applies, I mean, I think, I've always kind of said that, like whatever it takes for a client to kind of connect with it, if it's political, that so be it. But I mean, if it's about, concerns about climate change or resiliency or energy independence, there's really it's sort of an all of the above kind of answer and solution. And so I think, making sure that it's accessible to people for whatever need they have.
and I should also add for clients such as the bank loss clients, when they were given a choice of potentially a lot of money on historic preservation tax credit versus pursuing passive house certification, they preferred to choose the passive house certification, even though that didn't give them more money per se. They said, but why would I want to end up with a building that is less efficient, leaky windows? Why would I want to do that? And so they opted for their long-term investment in the building, which I think in the end, the visual, impact is the same. We were able to retain much of the historic character and details from the original building.
And that was how many units were in that? Was that a duplex?
It was 3-story brick veneer timber structure building in Richfield Springs and 9 a residential unit and 1 commercial on the ground floor.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so if let's say a client came to you who, wanted a single family new construction, but wasn't necessarily thinking about passive house, just for those architects out there maybe who are dealing with Passive House, trying to maybe not push Passive House, but trying to encourage their clients to think about Passive House. How has your approach to that changed over the years that your firm has been dealing with that?
Yeah, it has changed in that before, like Juhee had mentioned our first project where, she says, why would I do it any other way? We don't have to educate most of our clients coming to us. They're seeking us out because of what we do. So, we have created kind of that as a differentiator. But I've, coached this to, when I was, kind of giving talks for NYSERDA and other kind of energy efficiency kind of gatherings for builders who, or not builders, architects who are interested in kind of actually getting one under their belt is, just do it. Like you've got to present it to a client and not wait for the client to come along, but to kind of educate the clients that you've got so that they're making the right choices. Because if they don't know it, if they're not familiar with the concept, then how are they ever going to expect that from you? So I think it's just like we have to educate clients on, code issues or, zoning setbacks and things like that, give them real opportunities to understand the benefits of Passive House. And increasingly communities have stretch code requirements. So the best way to meet them is through Passive House. So I think it really takes, architects to be their own advocates for doing it.
Maybe this is a good time to just, I guess, do a little backstory on how we started. And of course, we were aligned with the right clients, from the beginning. And I'm also just thinking from the architect's point of view, who are trying to get their, momentum going in Passive House design. Obviously, your passion drives, right? And so back when we started, I was mostly kind of grounded with our young kids, and James was a very, very strong advocate, very, very passionate about the subject, and did a lot of public speaking, presentations, etc. And then we happened to align with the right client, so we got one Passive House built, and it just accumulates from there. Also, we did invest a lot at the beginning. We thought, like, oh my gosh, how much more hit can we take in terms of financial investment? We would invest in our employees. And as soon as they got their, Passive House certification, they realized they can earn more money elsewhere. So then they would leave. And there were many difficult moments, but now, we are now reaping the benefit of that hard-earned investment, I should say.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd also say that, just like we have clients who seek us out, I would also say that we have, potential employees who seek us out for the work too. So, now, my alma mater is University of Buffalo, and we have who's working with us who graduated from there and came to us with a CPHC already under her belt. So I think, having that professional standing and that commitment, helps us also secure the right staff too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's laws of attraction
Mhm,
eventually.
mhm.
that's great. And you have a lot of experience in working within Passive House from when it was really, really challenging to make it happen.
Mhm.
Mostly because it was hard to source the right products and everything, and get builders who were interested and even willing to take a risk on Passive House.
Right,
But
right.
I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about the market changes in your area and how that's affected your work process.
That's an interesting question. I mean, because, prior to the pandemic, the Hudson Valley was a pretty quiet place in terms of architecture. There there were a few hot pockets where like, kind of in-demand architects were brought in and, from, outside and there wasn't a lot of competition, but also it was a little bit sleepy and people weren't investing that much in design. But the pandemic really changed that and I think that's kind of a national situation where a lot more money is being kind of, pushed to more rural places, and there's a greater level of competition as the market here has transformed, and very much from the kind of influx of money and people moving mostly out of Brooklyn to the Hudson Valley. But there's people are willing to spend more money, and that's essential for projects. I mean, because it still does cost more to do passive house, but but people aren't doing such tight calculations of like, if I invest in this, am I going to recoup my money? That was very much a concern from the earliest stages. And now people are willing to go the extra mile to do their buildings a little bit better for their own comfort and their own enjoyment, but also recognizing that there is a growing demand for a passive house in the market, where now you're seeing speculative houses being built regionally. We did one project here in Cold Spring where a previous Victorian home had burned down, and we replaced it with a passive house. And when the house came up for sale, and the very much to not to the original builder's owner's surprise, but to her estate, the neighbors found out about it being on the market, and they got into a bidding war on it. So they got considerably higher than the asking price, because just with the actual knowledge that it's a passive house and there are so few of them available. It's one of the things we have people, coming to us about, is that, like looking for an existing house, there's just nothing that meets that performance goal regionally. So
And once you know that level of comfort is available, it's hard to settle for anything less.
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And so, another change that you've experienced, I understand that at least one of your projects, looking at your website, by the way, I just have to mention the beautiful, beautiful projects on there. So
Thank you.
hope all our
Thank you.
listeners get a chance to go and look at it. And one of them was Adirondack Passive, and you used prefabricated panels for that project.
Mhm.
And I just am curious, why was that choice made, and how did it affect your design process?
Yeah, that one we were contacted by a couple who was retiring to the Catskills, or I'm sorry, the Adirondacks, and they came to us looking for passive house exactly, but we didn't know of any builders regionally who would be able to deliver, and so working with New Energy Works and Sash and Frame Windows, it was a really nice kind of opportunity to ensure that we're getting the kind of quality build that we would need, and solving the kind of concerns about whether we would have a builder who's able to deliver. We ended up actually having a great local builder who had no passive house experience, but clearly having, high performance panels, you know, pre-glazed and installed on site really helped, and assure that we're getting what we're set out to do. And, the great benefit to it is that, they, when we finally get the panels on site, we had our first snow. It was early October. I was actually up canoe camping with my daughter, and we stopped in at the site to witness the first set of panels going in. And they had to brush the snow off the concrete deck, and the place is dried in within 2 weeks, and they're ready to start pulling wire. It's like the perfect approach to, particularly in some harder climates where you can get some really challenging weather.
And if I can add to the concept of prefab, so passive house and panel, like a prefab panel goes well together. And as James said, New Energy Works is one of a great resource, especially for architects who are starting out. And the other observation is that it certainly makes passive house achievable for those who are less experienced. However, if you do have a passive house builder who has a framing crew in-house, it is more economical to build a single family with that traditional stick build, but with a passive house envelope built on site. Is a very interesting comparison.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that you make about the economics of it, because I think many people would think automatically that panels created in a factory might cost less than on-site build, but in many cases that hasn't really proved correct. Are there
Right.
Maybe, I'm sorry, I think that is more economical in multifamily, probably. Like,
right for
yeah,
single family? Yeah. And a lot of times there's concerns such as, can you get the panels to the site? How
exactly.
easy or hard is it to do that?
Hmm.
Right.
But as you said, for maybe an inexperienced crew, it's a huge advantage because it gives you the air tightness already sort of baked into the project, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, in the case of New Energy Works, or they're doing, in factory cellulose installation as well as wood fiber exterior installation. All of it's, you know, done, it's inspected, it's dry. We know that it's got it's been pressurized to the right level. So it really just checks off all of the boxes and concerns that, working on site can raise. But at the same time, and to Juhie's point, like a really careful builder who ideally is trained in passive house, but it's we always end up working with people who are not, or often work with people who are not. Just somebody who is willing to really try something new and kind of work through with the details and with the rater and us. We can always see, a project completed and certainly on the more economical side.
And to reiterate about the builder who is a passive house builder with the in-house framing crew, Simple Integrity in Cooperstown area is a perfect example, who've worked with us on many projects, who's our client and builder on certain projects. And we are right now working on a single family with very limited budget, just outskirts of Cooperstown. And it's been such an efficient way of working together, especially with the client as well. This is a fun example where the clients are very capable. They're very creative clients, and we also have the builder, who is very well experienced in passive house building. And so we were working with this budget. It 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 will have to be or I'm sorry, it is not going to be penalized because Simple Integrity, they do, passive house really well, and they have in-house framing. And on top of that, they have a mechanical engineer, and electrician. So it's such a streamlined process. And so then the client will send us a SketchUp model of what they were thinking. I mean, we went back and forth many times trying to get the house to be the right size, but in the end, the communication three ways was so beautiful because we were able to hone in. Yes, we did stray a little off the program, and we were kind of, corralled back into what would fit in the budget. And, just like the building a wall system, the roof system, what the garage would have to be in order to be affordable, so we just streamlined the entire process. And so, because of our clients' initial limited funds, we focused on core and shell. And because the clients are very hands-on, meaning they are very skilled with their hands, although they've never really built a house before, they feel confident that they can, say, put together a custom cabinet for the kitchen, for example, and so, yeah, so that's one way to solve this, rise in costs in construction as well.
We've got another builder that we've completed. I think we're working on our eighth project with them, some higher end residential projects. And they did the math on one house that we've designed where they looked at the cost of various different wall systems to build it to deliver passive house performance, including looking at panelized. And they concluded that our kind of tried and true Larson truss with dense packed cellulose is the most cost effective way to build. And we're delighted to hear that because it was just a good reassurance that what our preferred go-to model works so well, in the financial scheme of things.
Yeah,
Right.
but
So
sometimes I'm sorry.
go
Uh,
ahead.
sometimes that wall makeup doesn't quite work out. It depends on the foundation. It seems to me that what is the foundation and relationship to the finishes that we want. Let's say if we want a stone wall base versus, you know, stucco or anyway, what I've learned is that foundation system also influences what the wall could be.
Well, it's so interesting because what you've both been saying is sort of preempted my next question, which was going to be, has achieving Passive House gotten any more affordable for your clients? So clearly the answer is yes, because you have builders who are experienced with Passive House and have been able to figure out what the most cost-effective wall assembly or roof assembly is in your area. And this, it sounds like, I'm not reading too much into it, but has allowed you to figure out how to deliver a more affordable Passive House at a more affordable cost over the years. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say that it's cost neutral, but you know, we have kind of, I think, in a lot of ways, optimized how to deliver it, and you know, and I think it's important testing different, you know, different approaches so that, and it's of course, you know, one size doesn't fit all, but you know, kind of sketching out different scenarios and how to deliver it, I think is really helpful, and that cost analysis, you know, particularly with higher end residential projects, the added cost of doing passive house is only an incremental component. If we're looking at, you know, the choice of certain tiles and, you know, and finishes, those have a greater cost implication and square footage than choosing to do higher performance. You know, the the demands on, you know, kind of budget, you know, are kind of, you know, kind of being pulled from different directions, and energy performance is really just a smaller part of that. And you know, I think one thing that is important about, you know, the cost analysis of it too is what the payback period is. You know, Juhee, you had done the math here on how long, you know, it took to benefit from the added cost of doing passive house.
Right. On our studio, we paid off the difference in 4 years. Yes, but we were also very active about paying down our debt because it was scary. And going back to what James was saying about Passive House becoming more efficient to deliver, I think there are pockets of efficiency, meaning, so someone like our office, we do it day in and day out. So we're very efficient in delivering Passive House. In other words, our fee is the same as, an average architectural fee would be, or sometimes we even, include interior design with it. And, someone like Simple Integrity, they do it all the time. So they can deliver more and more efficiency. But I think contractors who are coming in early and they're afraid of what they're running into, they may, still charge high. Material
Mhm.
cost is still, going up. So there are certain things that are working against us, but I think if you do find those who do it as their daily practice, you will find a streamlined delivery.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I hear about this over and over again that experience makes the cost more predictable and manageable of the premium that otherwise could be associated with delivering Passive House, as well as, of course, communication
Oh,
between
yes,
the architect and the builders and others involved in the project. So early
exactly.
and
Yeah.
often communication.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
that's a really good point, you know, and you know, like an experienced passive house builder, you know, they know when to ask the right questions, and you know, they understand the goals, and so they, you know, in managing their subs so that they, for example, don't have electricians going around and drilling through the air tightness layers, you know, and compromising the results. So, you know, just having a team that's really pulling together and really understanding the objectives, that's just critical.
Right.
And, and so basic. I mean, it's not, these are not really groundbreaking rules. It's just understanding, you know, what the priorities are.
And you're fortunate to have both sort of educated builders along the way, but also it sounds like you at least now have a choice of builders, contractors to work with. It's not just one firm in your area that's doing it. So that's a huge benefit, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Well, looking ahead, do you have any Passive House wishes for the near future? Any products that you really wish were available that could make your lives easier and make achieving Passive House easier?
Smaller mini split would be great for smaller houses, like ADUs or mini cabins are, on the demand right now, and we don't have enough smaller HVAC units, and more affordable thermal break materials would be great.
Mhm. Yeah.
James, you want to add?
Yeah, it's like the Passive House Christmas wish list. Yeah, I think like definitely Juhee nailed it with a smaller HVAC. We did a backyard pod, and it's not a certified passive house in part because we couldn't get a mechanical system small enough, but we had the Innova packaged heat pump unit that was really good, but I think it probably wouldn't meet our air tightness demands. But I think also things like, if we could have foam glass back as a thermal break against foundations, that'd be really, really great. Things like that are just, it's really expensive to do thermal breaks at the top of walls. So, something to help with that would be great.
Great. Well,
Mhm.
hopefully those innovators and manufacturers are listening. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I understand that you will be joining us, Passive House Accelerator Live, coming up Wednesday, December
Third.
3rd.
Yep.
Thank you. So hopefully the listeners can tune in for more of your wisdom on achieving single-family passive house.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. Really great to speak to, as you just described, some more pioneers, and I really like acknowledging how things weren't necessarily very easy when some of the people who were just getting started in Passive House were doing it back in the day, 2008. There wasn't as much available at that time, which we've referred to a lot in the past, and we often take for granted just how much harder it was to do in those days. So really great to acknowledge James and Juhee and to sort of give a bit of an update of where River Architects is these days. What were the highlights for you, and what encouraged you to have a chat to them again?
Well, as you said, it's great to talk to people in a different market phase of Passive House. I mean, I really appreciated hearing how much time they had invested in educating people.
Mm.
Sorry.
Oh,
Need some water.
Sorry.
you right.
Sorry, how much time they had invested in educating their community about Passive House and how it's really paid off for them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a really important part of that was that payback is not necessarily immediate, and they alluded to the fact that sometimes you train people and they become valuable and maybe go away, but the dividends will come in time, and now they're at a point where they're not just attracting better clients, but also attracting staff who specifically want to do what they're doing. So just because that return might not be immediate doesn't mean it won't necessarily come. And there's definitely a value in investing in your business and investing in your staff and your people. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, building on that, I think that this is a really kind of inspiring story because we're not only seeing the development and maturation and evolution of a practice, but also of a market. And the fact that, they talked about that passive house home that at resale triggered a bidding war when
Yeah.
people realized that it was passive house. And so there that kind of awareness of the value that these buildings bring to clients is great to see, and something that we need to
Yeah.
see. We need to see more and more, because there is this um, ongoing real value that you can you benefit from in these buildings that in many markets is not yet recognized. So this is proof positive that that can develop and become a real thing. And when they were
Uh,
talking about the how can you expect clients to choose passive house if they don't know what's possible? Like that there's this education process that needs to happen that you both alluded to. It also reminds me of Michael Ingwe's approach to talking about the benefits of passive house, and this is something that River Architects also talked about, was that the focus on the benefits, because clients don't recognize that they can have a building that is comfortable, and you can be right next to the window during the depth of winter and not feel drafts, and walk around in your sock feet, and for like the retrofits can be free of, and new buildings can be free of dust and bugs, and all, and quiet and durable, and all these things that there's this key education process that needs to happen for people to even understand that that is something that's a possibility from a building.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to cost a lot either, and that was interesting about that. They paid off the difference in 4 years, but also
Yeah.
alluded to the fact that on higher end projects, the added cost of passive house is very, very small, and some people will spend more on their tiles and finishes than it actually costs to do the bits that are going to make it a standard house into a passive house, which is definitely true for higher end. And if that's the market you're in, it's relatively easy, or should be a relatively easy uplift to passive house. And interesting thinking about how to increase those efficiencies across the broader market as well. Mary, I was really glad that you asked about what's next, because we've talked about James and Juhee being innovators and sort of pioneers, but thinking now about what they'd like to see come to market, which is a great question. They mentioned mini splits. Obviously, heat pump technology is emerging, and then also talk of thermal brakes, and thermal brake systems. Any other thoughts from you, Mary, about sort of what they're doing now and where to from here?
Well, I was struck by, when they talked about the project where they use prefabricated panels and how it's not suitable for every project, but it's good for markets where the builders aren't quite ready to take the risk of passive house. And yet, so this having a panelized approach just simplifies the the construction for the building teams so that they can be sure to hit the air tightness target, for instance, and
Yeah.
also, weather
Well,
tightness,
yeah, and
etc.
a great reminder. You don't necessarily need your builder to be a super experienced passive house builder. If they're reasonable at achieving quality and are just a good operator, then if you've got good systems in place, you can take them along on that journey and sort of train them on the job.
So that's great that they, are flexible in what they can offer people. And,
Yeah.
it's sort of an extension of what they've been doing in their own market, which is educating and bringing Passive House out through various methods. So that's great.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mary, for that interview. So, Zach, what have we got coming up over at the Accelerator and at Reimagine?
Yeah, well, we have more river architects coming up, and I should also mention that we have a great video, kind of short documentary piece about river architects Bank Lofts project that was touched on during the interview, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Tomorrow, on Wednesday, December 3rd, we have River Architects joining us for Passive House Accelerator Live. It's a 101 session of Passive House Accelerator Live focused on single family passive house design. So please join us and James and Juhee for that excellent event. And then this Friday, our big event which culminates the Reimagine Buildings Conference Series of 2025 is Reimagine Buildings Best of Retrofit. And this is a 4-hour virtual conference that's happening. We get 4 hours of real projects and proven strategies that you can use in your work. And we've retrofits from small single family projects to large buildings and everything in between. This is really a must-attend event for anyone who is renovating existing buildings into healthy, comfortable, and climate-friendly spaces. So we hope you join us. It's a fantastic roster of presenters on tap for you, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Hope to see everyone at those great events. Check everything out over at the Passive House Accelerator and, of course, at Reimagine Buildings. And we'll be back again next week on Passive House Podcast.